Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. Jeffrey Burke here. I am so glad you are here today. We're going to have another fun one. And you know what? I say that every single time, but you know what? They're all fun to me. I love being able to take the time and visit with wonderful industry icons and people that have made a dramatic difference in our industry that are continuing to make those differences every single day. I think you're going to love this. Today, I have Melody Martorana with me representing Emerald Health. They are one of the cleanest lines I've had the pleasure to work with. This is my very, very, very first podcast with them, and I'm so excited. I know you're seeing them. They're all over social media, and if you've had the pleasure to use their products, you're going to be very happy about the show today. We're going to talk about the history. We're going to talk about, where they are, where they're going, because, they become a real leading force in our industry, and I want people to know about clean products and well-formulated products that use quality nutrients and ingredients, and they're not just putting dust in a capsule or tablet. We want to make a difference. When you finally make that decision to get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy, pick products that can make a difference and make that journey successful. Otherwise, you're just going to be upset that you're not getting any satisfaction. So choose wisely, as I tell people all the time. So help me welcome my guest, Melody. Hello and welcome. I'm so excited.
Hello. It's so nice to be here. I'm really excited and honored to be a guest on your show.
Thank you so much. Oh, well, I'm right back at you. You're doing so much work out there, and the company is fantastic. I did have the pleasure of having Kelly Capizzola on here before, longtime friend. And that was wonderful. She came out behind the not wanting to use the camera and actually did a podcast with me, and she was brilliant. And
she said only for you. She said only for you. She's a great friend of mine too. We're both very, very fortunate.
Yeah, she's an amazing person. So let's bring everybody up to date. They're going to be meeting you for the first time today. Let's talk a little bit about you. Where are you coming from, and how'd you get here?
Well, so it's been a long journey for me with Emerald Labs. I've been with the company now for 17 years. I've been in the industry for 22. And I actually came from property management many moons ago. And the funny thing is that I really believe that you bring yourself wherever you go, right? So whatever industry you find yourself in, you bring your spirit, you bring your energy, you bring your ethics, your whatever it is, your work ethic, and you just pour yourself in wherever it is that you're planted. That's what I believe in. So I would always be really, trying to do extra for any of our residents. And I was working on a property that was a renovation property. Anyways, I built this special relationship with this gentleman, and he reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something." I thought, oh no, was I too friendly? and he said, no, I have a job for you. And I said, interesting. And if you're working on a renovation property, it's exhausting, right? Yes. So I was like, okay, maybe I should think about this. And he said, I'd like you to be my, national sales manager. And I said, listen, and his name was Lou, and he was a wonderful guy. And I said, listen, Lou, I've been taking vitamins my whole life, but that's about all I know about it, And this was like back in the day where I grew up taking, like Shaklee, and then there was people who were into Amway, right? Everybody's always been trying to do something good for their health, since the dawn of time, right? Sure. But, where we were then and where we are now, it's like such a big divide, in the science and the technology and the things that we know. But he said, no, he said, I can train you. I just think you're the right person. And having that, connection with somebody that was just formed out of bringing myself to that industry and just doing what I do in that industry, it tied me into this one. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take a big leap of faith and dive in. And it was a huge, huge decision. And I was with Lou for 5 years. But here's the funny tie-in is that Rick Simpson, the owner of Emerald Labs, the owner and founder of Emerald Labs, was manufacturing products for Lou. So
I
the
see the
bridge,
connection.
you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I'll always be so grateful that Lou brought me in. He was a wonderful human being. And I'm so thankful that I am where I am today. I learned so much in those first 5 years that bridged me over. And then since then, I mean, you know, volumes more since I've been at Emerald Labs as well.
I love the way you guys do your social media. You keep it real. And I think that that's really important because, you know, you don't have to say things that are not true. You don't have to make claims that definitely are not true. You just basically have wonderful people on there just talking about the things that we all talk about, you know, our eyes, our gut, our skin, our health, you know, that kind of stuff. And you've made a line of products that they're enjoyable to use. And because you know that they're formulated in a way where the formulators and all through the production use passion, and they have an end result they're looking for, and they're also following all the safety standards as well. So to me, that's really important. I wish I could say every company in the industry did this. There's many, many, many that do. And companies that do are the companies you'll see on my podcast, just like they were the companies you saw on my radio show, because credibility and passion and honesty and clarity and transparency are the things that are important to me, because I'm basically putting my name on their products, you know, so I have to feel good about it. So I thank you for all of that. And that's such a wonderful story because there are no coincidences in life.
No.
My grandmother used to always tell me, and she's so right, you know, so there was a reason for you to end up here, and here you are. How fantastic.
Yes. And, you know, the thing is, you know, Rick Simpson, the owner and founder of the company, you know, he got into health food industry back in like 83, working for a chain here in Southern California. And then ultimately went to work for, you know, a biochemist who had an integrative clinic, and then branched out on his own. And it was in 96 that he really started a contract manufacturing company. So that's like where that bridge was created with the company that I was introduced into this industry in. And then in 2001, you know, he bought the rights to one of those brands that he was manufacturing for. They were ready to like get out of the industry. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, this is the dream. So he brought his brother in, Bob. So really, truly, this is a family owned and operated company. So, you know, Rick to this day, like he's semi-retired. We call it semi-retired because he still keeps his hand on the, you know, he keeps his finger on the pulse of the company at all times. So if there's anything that's important, he gets to be involved in that. Like he wants to be involved. And then, you know, there's things about Rick is kind of like the magic of this company. You know what I mean? He's the heartbeat of the company. Nobody can tell the story the way that he does, but really it's an outpouring of his passion for this industry and what it did for his own personal wellness. And all of the knowledge that he gathered really allowed him to create what we have today, which is, you know, this company that is doing additive-free manufacturing for our brand. And that's, you know, that's fairly unusual in this industry. And it doesn't mean that all the companies that aren't doing that are, you know, bad, because there's so many wonderful companies in this industry, but it is such a difference because he's in control of this whole thing from beginning to end, raw material sourcing to finished goods. And we have to do things differently to do that. But it's really such a big, it really has such a big impact on the industry, which is really wonderful. When I started working for Rick, it was March of 2009.
Oh
And my
my.
first day on the job was at Natural Products Expo West. And I was like, wow, this was, you know, for anybody who's ever gone to that show for the first time, yes, mind boggling, right? And I have been in love with trade shows ever since then. You know, it's one of those things where you get so energized, and after so many years in the industry, you have so many great friends and you connect, but also just getting to talk to customers that are on the East Coast and we're in California. And, you know, it's very energizing. And then at the end of the day, it's like, whoo, deflated balloon, got to recharge for the next day. But it's really very invigorating to be part of that. And it really does make you think about what a beautiful, wonderful industry we're in, full of so many people that just want to help others. And it's really a nice thing to be a part of that.
I went to my 43rd Expo West this year. And there's been
That's awesome.
45, but two of them were pandemicized. So they were closed down. So yeah, it was my 43rd. I've been to every one. I've spoke at more than I can even remember. And I call it like coming home, because I love to see what's new. I like to see what's trending. I like to see what's coming around for like the third time in popularity, and and see all my friends and my peeps, and so many of my guests are there as well. And I almost forgot, we're talking about Kelly. Dr. Stengler was on with me already once too.
Yeah.
And he was a wonderful, wonderful guest. And, everybody brings something different, and having the different personalities and the different, focal parts of their personalities when you have a company, they all add together to make this beautiful end result, which is a line of products that are credible and clean.
Well, and I'm so glad that you brought up Dr. Stengler, because, Rick Simpson and Dr. Stengler, they had a relationship for years where they were, talking and building a friendship. But right around the time when I started working for the company, which again, it's been 17 years with Emerald Labs, we, started working with Dr. Stengler, and he's our formulating physician. So that's another really incredible thing about, I'm so thankful to be part of this, because we're working with a naturopathic physician. He's been in clinical practice for over 31 years, but that's something that's kind of a set apart, is that he is still in active clinical practice. He's still seeing patients. He's still running blood work. A lot of doctors, a lot of naturopathic doctors will have various different chapters of their lives. They'll do their clinical practices. They might write some books. They might do, various little projects, but usually it's like at the end of that chapter, when they stop working clinically, that they start really heavily writing books. They might come out with a supplement line, and all of that is great, because how many years of, experience do they have? But there's something really special about working with Dr. Stengler, who is on the cutting edge of all the current science, because he's literally applying these things to patients today, So, he basically drives like what he wants to see, what he wants to be able to use in the clinics, what he's finding that patients are needing and what's missing in the industry. And so by and large, he'll approach us and say, hey, this is an ingredient I'd like to use. So a lot of the formulas that we have in our product line are branded ingredients. We're using Pure Whey C. There's a 12-hour retention time versus like a standard 4 to 5 washout with a typical vitamin C from ascorbic acid. We use Albion mineral chelates. They're considered gold standard in the industry.
They are.
And, our bodies don't produce minerals. So, the absorption factors are really important. And, the thing is that as a company, we are really committed to fair-minded pricing, because, you can charge somebody what the market can bear, but are they going to be able to come back to that product, right? And just having a doctor behind the line, some companies might say, hey, we're going to charge 4 or 5 times what we would. And, Rick has never been that way. And, his mentality of fair-minded pricing, his mentality of generosity, and of, providing like top-notch win-win, let's provide win-win care for people. We want them to win. We want us to win. We want to do this together. We grow together with our partnerships. When a customer calls in, it is so nice to just be able to take care of them, and not be like, well, the policy states, and that's a really important thing to me, because I think it's also a part of who I am. In every industry that I've ever touched, I want to take care of people. I want to be able to find a way to say yes. I want to be able to find a way to say, okay, at the end of the day, I didn't win on policy. We both won together because you're happy and it was fair. It was a fair resolution. And so are we going to be the cheapest company on the shelf? Probably not, because when you use premium ingredients and European botanicals, these are more expensive ingredients. But the other thing is that, like you touched on at the beginning of the show, we're not fairy dusting.
Nope.
That fairy dusting our products. These are based on clinical studies, and these branded ingredients have had double-blind placebo studies, human clinical placebos. And so the amounts that are being put into these formulas are the amounts that were shown to be effective in the studies. And that makes all the difference in the world, because really, truly, the most expensive product is the product that does nothing for you.
Oh, that's
Right.
so true. Oh my
So,
goodness, so true. The other thing is, you guys are known as the Additive-Free company. And I think that that is very, very profound and necessary. There was a time when many of the companies would use additives just to fill space, and they'd want everything to be full and the capsules to be overloaded. And I mean, it kind of was just the way of the industry. But consumers are getting more intelligent. They're looking for more transparency, thank goodness. They want to make sure that what they're using is the best of the best, but also in a way that allows them to have a product that is clean. And I use that word a lot because it's very applicable. But what was the decision for the additive-free kind of philosophy?
so, Rick, I think you're going to look forward to at some point talking to him
Hmm.
on your show.
Yes.
And when he tells you the story in his words, it's really special. But, he is a person who asks a lot of questions. And one of the big questions he asks is like, can we? Can we make products without this, without that? Why are these things in the product? And, the reality is that even though all of the manufacturing additives are considered GRAS, generally recognized as safe, the necessity of them is not necessarily for the benefit of the consumer. It's for the health of the manufacturer.
Yeah.
So, you use things like flow agents like magnesium stearate. It's the most commonly used flow agent in the industry. People don't realize that raw material powders, it's kind of like, the analogy I make is like being in your kitchen, you're going to bake cookies,
Hmm.
right? You've got brown sugar, which is super sticky. You've got flour, which is fine and powdery. You've got salt, which is just grainy and will pour right out of anything very easily. But the same is true with raw materials. So what do you do to even that out and make sure everything flows through the machines easily and things aren't getting stuck in the machines? Well, magnesium stearate, it's a very simple solution to that. And it is the most commonly used flow agent in the industry for a
Yep.
reason, because it's not an easy feat for us as a company to not use it. We have to use really innovative blending techniques. We have to slow our machines down. We have to do significantly more cleaning in between runs. Like, there's not an easy out here. We also don't use lubricants on our capsules. We use only vegetable hypermellose capsules that are from non-GMO pine bark. They're like the cleanest in the industry. It's basically just hypermellose and water, and it's like a purified water. And they follow like all the European standards. It's like every box you can tick, they're ticking. But they're very brittle. So once those powders are blended and ready to go into encapsulation, the alignment on the machines like has to be perfectly calibrated or they just shatter. So there's just so many pieces to the puzzle that it makes perfect sense to use additives in manufacturing. It doesn't make sense to not use them, but that's what we're doing, because Rick Simpson is very passionate about, what, if we don't have to put it in there, let's not put it in there. And I think that was one of the things that really cemented the relationship that we have today with Dr. Stengler, because he works clinically with a lot of sensitized patients.
Yes.
He specializes in everything from homeopathy to, hormone balancing. But when you're working with sensitized patients, sometimes things that 99% of the population aren't going to be reactive to, those sensitized patients might be. Or when you're working with an aging population, where digestive enzymes are, dramatically reduced, people's gut microbiome may not be balanced and healthy. The things that, are easy for a younger person to digest are harder for the aging population to digest. And they're probably taking the most pharmaceutical medication. Their biome's probably the most offset. And yet they're trying to break down products that have all sorts of little baby barriers in the way. You know what I mean? That's another reason why we don't do tableting, and there are some really cool technologies today, like melt away technologies that are kind of a different thing. They're all on their own. But, the traditional definition of tableting means that about a third of that tablet has to be additives. And it has to be that way because you're using like 10 to 15,000 pounds of pressure to compress a tablet, but it has to have glues and gums and binders and waxes and shellacs because, powders can be gritty. You're not going to just swallow a gritty tablet. You need something on there to like make it pleasant to swallow. And then, there's other things that come into play like dyes and whatever. And so there's a lot of things that, can go into the manufacturing process. We do capsules. So all you're getting, if it's powder ingredient, it's just what it says on the label. If it's an encapsulated ingredient, which most of ours are, it's just the capsule and the nutrients. So under other ingredients, all you're going to see is capsule. So, and that's a commitment that we've made as a company, is to not include non-nutritive ingredients in our manufacturing process.
That makes it just so desirable. And, as I'm listening to you, I instantaneously get it. It just makes sense. And if you're someone like that as a consumer, or you're listening and you take a lot of supplements, or you're a follower of mine for a very long time, how I feel about using products that not only make a difference, but they're what is in the product is on the label, and what is in the product is the best you could choose from at that point in time when the product was made, and the safety checks that go along the way. Because I know you guys do a lot of testing, and I know that the purity studies are there. So it just makes it, that's the way it should be. I wish that was the way it was across the board. It's not, and that's what gives everybody the selection to be able to choose what they want to choose. My job in the industry, and has been for many, many decades, is to call out the companies that I know are doing it right and let the consumer make up their own mind. If you see my counter downstairs, you will see that I have products from so many different companies, because not one company does it all. So there's other companies that do things better than this one. This one does it a little bit better than this one. So I have a plethora of products from the top companies that are down there. And if I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to choose a product that makes a difference, that I know what went into it. When I open it up and I hold that capsule in my fingers, I think to myself, I know what went into this capsule. I feel good putting this in my body, because you know how the world is today. We eat and consume a lot of things that we probably shouldn't. And the things that we tend to crave are the things we should not be doing, but we still do it. Maybe not as much as we did when we were younger. But the thing is, we have to choose wisely, because you're not just taking a supplement to take a supplement. There was a time when we used to tell people, you're taking your supplements today so that 40 years down the road, your golden road years will be better. That was fine. Today, we tell people you're taking supplements to repair the damages and the cracks and the crevices that you've already created. We want to start filling those today. We're not waiting 40 years. We need to fix it now and start bringing balance back to our body. So we do look at supplements differently today. So once again, I always tell people to choose wisely.
Well, we're really happy to be amongst those brands that you trust.
Absolutely.
I have a very similar, it's not a counter, it's a hanging rack on a door that is like full of supplements. Most of them are ours, but definitely there's some fantastic companies that I trust. And if we don't have it, I go straight to them. And that's a big deal, and you were talking about too, I think one of the things that's really great about this industry, you mentioned like the pandemic, right? And how everything shut down. What a wild time that was in the world. But what a blessing it was to be part of an industry that was already positioned to help people and meet them where they were at. I found that was such an interesting thing to realize. It sort of leveled up the depth of my love for this industry, even though it was already so anchored, because I realized that we were so uniquely positioned to already meet people. We weren't like manufacturing fad products. We weren't scrambling to be there. We were already there. We already had alignments that were really going to support people from this wild thing that nobody had ever seen before, right? And so it's one of those things where, to be there in the bad times, but then also to be there in the good times. Like here we are today, You know, I have a teenager who I'm already like, kid, you need to get this on board, this on board, this on board. Let's take care of your brain. Let's take care of your hormones. Let's take care of all of those good things because I want her to have a healthy journey
Mm-hmm.
starting now, you know, being a student. You know, we don't want to be trying to scramble at the end of our lives because having a long life is a blessing, but only if you're healthy, you know? I don't want to reach the end of this long life and I'm miserable and you know, I don't have any quality of life. So being part of this industry and taking all of these good nutrients is a part of that long-term goal in this journey. And you don't have to live in an ivory tower. You know, that's definitely that's you know, I've picked that up from Rick over the years because you know, he's such a healthy guy overall, but he's like, we don't need to live in an ivory tower. But at the end of the day, you know, you want to go ahead and continue to put good things in. You want to go ahead and continue to support your wellness because it is a long-term goal.
You know what's funny is there's a lady that I know and she's in her late 90s and I've known her for a very long time and she was a vegan, like a vegetarian and then a vegan years before anybody was. And she stopped eating gluten like years ago, so she was really a trendsetter. And she said,
Mhm.
this is what she said, you reminded me. She said, you don't have to live in an ivory tower that has an elevator unless you have a ladder on the outside of the building in case the elevator fails. She said, you need to be able to get to the top one way or another. The one process would be slow, the other one would be quicker. You still need to have access. And my grandmother, you know, was very, very healthy. She taught us about picking dandelions and making dandelion tea. We used to go foraging in the woods, and she had a pot on her stove. I talk about this a lot. She was making bone broth before bone broth was a thing. And I kid you not, I
Mhm.
think that pot was on her stove for like 30 years. And I don't even think it ever left the stove. I think she just kept adding chickens and onion and garlic and celery. Because when you went to her house, she would meet you at the door with a coffee cup of chicken broth. And she was
Mm.
very small. She was like 4 foot something. You just didn't argue
Yeah.
with her because she would win. And you just drank it out of respect, but then you got to rely on it, you know. And we were eating fresh mushrooms and asparagus, and she always had a garden, and you know, so I learned a lot of stuff very, very young on. But she used to tell me she was starting to take supplements when she was much, much older. She said there was a time when food was food, and you
Yes.
and you ate for
Yes.
the reason of restoring your body to make it strong enough so you could go out in the fields the next day and do what you did today. She goes, today we have to eat food, but we have to supplement it because food is no longer food. She was the first one
Mhm.
that I ever think said food stuff. She goes, it's food stuff. It's not even real food. So the
What a
world has
wise
changed.
woman.
Oh my goodness. I've been very blessed to have this wonderful chain of people around me that they were influencing me and I didn't even know it, you
What a
know, and
wise woman handing you a cup of love. That's what that was. She was handing you a cup of love when you got to
mhm.
her front door.
Because I
And
remember
that is
when
so
I remember
true.
when well, I remember when bone broth was launching and it was this big hot thing and I was standing back going, I know about this. I've been doing this for decades, and but that's okay. I'm glad it came out because people were able to learn about something they may not have known about. And my friends would come over to visit because I spent a lot of my time as a childhood in my childhood in my grandmother's house that was next door to our house. So most of my
Oh, I
friends
love
would come
that.
over there because she cooked. And they would eat food. So everybody would come over to her house. There'd be 15 bikes out in the driveway because everybody wanted to go there. And I thought to myself, I am so lucky. I mean,
Yes.
kids wanted all this other stuff. They go to her house. She'd be making cabbage rolls and pierogies and all this kind of
Oh, I
stuff.
love
And
that.
everybody's sitting around, and she'd be like, "Eat," and they're like, "Nana, I'm full." No, you're not. Eat. You know, she was almost
Communal
a
grandmothering.
Polish Ukrainian, and oi. But I tell
I
you
love
what,
that.
yeah, we learned a lot from her, and I carry a lot of her ideas and her philosophies in my back of my mind all the time. And I think that sometimes I call on these little stories. I call myself sometimes a storyteller, but you know what? People can relate to it because maybe they had a nana. Or they had somebody in their life that was giving them ideas, and they think to themselves, you know, I never thought about how much I learned from that person.
Well, I
So,
was, you know, I was also half raised by my grandparents.
mhm.
So I know that my grandmother canned, my grandmother made fresh chicken soup. When I was 19, I remember getting sick. And she says, okay, Mija, I'll be right over. And she came over with like chicken parts and the little star noodles. I mean, like, listen, I wasn't definitely some gluten in there, but the fresh veggies and everything. And she just like got it together in the pot. But it was great because I was 19 and she was still putting star noodles in my soup.
Aw.
But, yeah, but it really is true, though. They came from a generation where food was food. And, growing up, they had a beautiful piece of property up in the Big Bear Mountains. And there was, and it was like 2 hours off dirt road away from anything, no hot running water, but it was a home. We used to have to heat everything. Everything was run on propane. I have many summer memories there, but there was an orchard and there was a garden. And my grandmother, I used to go with her and pick green beans. And then, she would can them. And there was always canned goods there. And, if we weren't at the property, like a wayward hiker might come and take some canned goods and leave a pair of sneakers. You know what I mean? It was like, just, there's something about all of those memories that are still such an anchor in my heart as well. But they did grow up in a time where food was food. And that's the thing about this, right? The baseline for everybody is that your desire is to eat clean, organic, sustainable, ethically, sourced foods, right? And that's a good baseline. But the thing is we don't have, crop rotation practices like the indigenous peoples did, where they would allow the fields to remineralize, where, and so you can't pull a carrot out of the ground and know how much beta carotene you're going to get. So eating well, most of the time, right? Again, having some ice cream or whatever you like is fine,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
but your foundational like dietary choices are a big thing. However, it's still important to supplement because even the best diet, even the best genetics too, because let's not forget the genetic factors. There are people who smoke their whole lives and live to be 100. And then there's people who don't touch a cigarette in their life and, develop lung cancer.
Right.
So there's this genetic lottery that we're all subject to too. And a lot of what's going on in the nutrition industry today too is starting to center more around genetics and understanding, genetic variances and how that affects how people absorb nutrition as well. So, at the end of the day, supplementation with standardized ingredients where you're guaranteed that you're going to get the same thing every time you take it, it's really important to either fill nutritional gaps, like small ones or big ones. And so that's another reason why I really believe in supplementation. And the genetic factors are real. That's one of the reasons why we include, we use methylated folate in any formula. We have 17 multis and we have the Be Healthy formula. We only use methylated folate because there's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 46% of Americans that have an MTHFR gene defect, which doesn't allow them to properly metabolize folate from food or synthetic folic acid. And, those deficiencies can affect so many systems in your body. It can affect your brain health. It can affect your heart health. It can affect how you, metabolize things that you need to exit your body, So, including homocysteine, which is a biomarker for inflammation. And of course, inflammation is like the gateway to all these disease states. So, it is really important, like that we keep our hearts where our grandmothers set them. And we keep our hearts in those things that the wholesome beginnings, the wholesome foundations, the boned broth, the homemade chicken soup, eating wholesome, good foods that, that whole chicken soup for the soul, right? Like our grandmothers gave us chicken soup for the soul, right?
That's right.
But at the end of the day, those nutritional gaps, because of the way that our farming industry is today, it's just really, it's a scale production. It's not, it's not as focused on how nutritionally dense are what we are growing. It's focused on how much can we grow? How quickly can it be to market?
I saw it was a panel just recently, and it made me think, because I knew all this, but it just, the way that she presented it, and she said, you know, I get asked frequently why supplements are important for today's world. And she said, the way that I answered it, and I was listening to her speaking, she said, I told people that food is not food anymore. You know, and they talked a little bit about that. And they said, but even if food was still food, what has changed is the way and what food is grown in today, which means our soils are denatured. That's why regenerative is starting to become an issue. We've been doing organic for 40 years now, and we haven't been using chemicals, but we completely ignored Mother Nature's soil and ignored it. Now it's naked and barren, and no nutrients are going up into the vegetables and the fruits anymore. And on top of that, stress levels, pollution levels,
100%.
global warming, anxiety, depression, health conditions that we didn't even have a name for way back then because they might not have been an issue. And you pile all this on top of each other. And if you can actually tell me that you don't need supplementation of some kind or another, they said, I would love for you to try to convince me. We need it today because we need it to be healthy, to get healthy, to stay healthy. And if you got everything running now and everything is good, why not do things that make it consistently, you know, keep going in the right direction? Don't sit back and wait for a problem to happen. And if you're noticing things, listen. Your body is talking to you. Do not ignore it. Do not turn up the music louder so you can ignore the thoughts and the ideas in your head. You know, go in and use medicine for what it should be used for, diagnostic. Go in and find out, have a good doctor that is nutritionally oriented. If they're not, fire him and go find one that is. Just
I
like a
love
plumber.
that you said that.
Well, it's like hiring a plumber at your house. If they come 3 times and they don't fix the problem, you fire the plumber and you hire another one that knows what they're doing or that has the same mindset as you, which is the most important.
Because they work for and with you.
That's right.
I can't tell you how many calls I've gotten from, and I find it's really more elderly people that call that are, you know, there's a reason why, like, we have to protect our elderly population because it's so, you know, they're the ones who have scam callers, you know, they go into a doctor and they kind of get pushed around if it's an allopathic physician. I remember taking my grandmother to the doctor, and she was a little bit hard of hearing, but I remember distinctly the way that they would talk to her in a very patronizing way, where they would talk to me. And I would say, I'm here for support. She's an intelligent woman. She's right here. You can talk to her.
That's right.
And, you know, a lot of people feel like they can't give pushback. And I remember when my babies were young, I remember really getting into a heated conversation with a doctor who was really just trying to push a schedule with my daughter. And I said, listen, I understand that it is your job to do this. I understand it's your medical training to recommend this. You can recommend this, but I'm still her mom and I love her and you don't love her. And just because I disagree with you or I want to alter the way that I do this or slow it down or not follow your exact schedule because our circumstances dictate that she's not being exposed to all of these things right now, doesn't mean that I'm not an intelligent person.
That's right.
And I actually wrote her a letter because I could feel myself so frustrated in the moment. And I was feeling like I was getting pushed around and I absolutely put my foot down, but I got home and I wrote her an email and I said all the things I wanted to say to her. The next time we walked into the office, it was a completely different experience because she understood that I was going to stand my ground. And I think it's important to be able to have a conversation. And if you're with a doctor and they're not willing to have a conversation with you and they're not willing to work with you and come up with a plan with you that works, bye.
Adios.
Right. And I know that that's easier said than done. Like,
True.
You know, Dr. Stengler is a phenomenal integrative medicine specialist. And I know that, you know, people have different insurance issues or whatever it is, so they can't always tap into the resources that they want. But there are so many more allopathic physicians that are becoming integrative because that is what people are demanding. People are not settling for just the bare minimum, throw a pharmaceutical at me. there's a time and place for pharmaceuticals, but it's never in my life been a go-to. Have I ever taken an antibiotic? For sure. Is it the first thing I run to when I'm unwell? Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. Because the other thing about that is, right, we have this is another thing in our industry, why our industry is so valuable. There's so much overuse of antibiotics. And what ends up happening with people is that when something really heavy comes down the line, you now have resistance and it's no longer working for you.
That's right.
So it's never been a go-to. And it doesn't mean that you throw it away. It just means that this is something that you reserve for when it's needed. And, again, everybody can make their own choices. We have the autonomy to do what is right for us, what is right for our families. The point is, I think that one of the things that I've loved the most about this industry, and then when I used to do, the show with Rick, is that in what you're doing today is that it's a platform to talk to people, to help educate people, to help people really think about things like, hey, yeah, I am empowered. This is my body. This is my life. I think that people are educating themselves now more than ever. I think they're demanding more of their medical professionals. I think they're demanding more of their products because they're learning how to read labels. They're learning the differences between nutrient forms. There can be a multitude of different nutrient forms that are used in products, and one is going to make a dramatic difference, and one may not do a whole lot for you. And one of the things that I love about our company's commitment to using only nutritive ingredients. We use so many branded ingredients. We're using the clinical amounts. We're following Dr. Stengler's clinical recommendations, is that people are truly experiencing benefits from taking our products because, again, the most expensive product you can take is the one that doesn't work for you. But also, what about people who have never approached our industry? And then they walk into, a drugstore, they pick up the first thing on the shelf. They don't know what they're taking. They might be taking something in a tablet that's using the cheapest forms of nutrients possible. They take it and they're like, this doesn't work for me. I guess I need to go get the pharmaceutical from my doctor. And, it's a shame because they're not really truly getting an opportunity to experience the benefits that they can from taking something that really works, that's really effective. And that is something that is like a shame on shame on, any part of the industry that's not pouring their whole heart in, because most of this industry, I think the greater part of this industry is.
I think so too. And you just made one of the best points, and I've used it before. One of the most disheartening things to me is for someone to go buy a cheap, inferior product, not get the results that they may have heard about or heard people talking about, and then throwing it away and saying the entire industry doesn't work, rather than going someplace where they can have a conversation to a knowledgeable person in a brick and mortar, or a mom and pop store, and they'd be like, well, that's not the way you should go. You need to use something that has the quality and the integrity, or you're not going to get the results you're looking for. But there's only a few of them who will follow that path. The rest of them will just throw the whole industry under the bus because they used something that was cheap and they didn't get great results.
Right. And that's going to be in every industry, right?
Absolutely.
Any industry, there's going to be varying qualities. I think there's so many companies in our industry doing good work that have the right heart and that are belong in this circle because they're following this mission. But there's also, like in every industry, there's going to be companies that really are kind of coming from outside this industry, kind of vulturing in and going, oh, let's find the cheapest form of this new fad ingredient. Let's get to market. Let's make our piece of the pie. And those are the companies that hurt people, that hurt the industry. Maybe they're not causing any like dramatic physical problems for people, but at the end of the day, this industry is built on love and health and wellness and wanting to do good. So it's really nice to be part of that. It's really nice to know that you're like fighting the good fight with the good guys,
Well, and keep in mind that if there is a raw product supplement individual that is selling their raw product and it's subpar, and it's not good quality and there's not a lot of testing, and they come to a company like yours, like Emerald, and we're just like, we can't use that. You don't have any stats, you don't have any testing, you don't have and you turn them away. Someone out there is going to buy that raw product and they're going to use it. So it allows you to have even more trust in the companies that are doing it right. I have loved this conversation today. This has been so much fun. I like to ask my guest a question at the end of every single show. So you up for that?
I am.
Okay, my question for you is, if you could make one singular change that could become the rule of law within the natural products industry, what would that change be?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's such a good question. I would say, don't enter this space unless you intend to do good.
Ooh. Nice. And agreement as well. I have had so much fun with you today, and I know this is just one of many we're going to be doing, and I really want to thank you for being here today. It was an absolute pleasure. If someone wants to get a hold of you, do they get a hold of you through your social platforms?
Certainly, but I have to tell you, they can call us at the 800 number, 800-436-4366. Press 2 if you want to get to a person. Family owned and operated. We don't have a call center. Chances are I'm one of 4 people answering the phone. You can reach me.
I love it.
We really do try to keep it tight. We really want to make sure that people are getting the best experience possible when they reach out to us. And that's just something that I really love about being part of Emerald Labs. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but we've been in business 25 years, Dr. Burke. 25 years.
Wow, that is so.
Here we are.
Quarter of a century, baby.
Quarter of a century, and I've been here 17 of those years.
Working on the 50 now. Working on the next 25. I hope you guys have loved this as much as I have today. So much heartfelt, good, passionate information. Some great reminders, because sometimes we forget so much more than we remember and keep in our cranium. You know how it goes. How many times have you said, oh, I forgot all about that? I say it a lot because I've got so much stuff running through my brain all the time, but I'm always happy with a friendly reminder. So make sure you go to my YouTube channel. When you're there, tap on the subscribe button because it gets more play and more focus for my absolutely incredible guests. I want them to be seen. I want them to be heard. I want to shine a light on their awesomeness, and that's what I want to do. So I hope you will come back and see us again. I know you're going to. Anything you want to leave for a last comment?
I just want to thank you for having me on. I'm so thankful to be developing this lovely friendship with you. I think that you're doing so much good in this industry and in this world. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much. You make me blush. Melody Martorana today here from Emerald Labs. Look them up. Check their products. Take a look at their formulas. And we will be getting to the nitty-gritty as we continue this. And we'll be talking about different products, different situations, different health conditions. And we're going to kind of reel it in so that you'll be able to fine-tune the things that are available for you out there using this wonderful additive-free line of products, Emerald Labs. Have a great day, everybody. Do something good for you and do something special for someone that you don't even know. Have a great day. God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.